Hey, in a few weeks, it's going to be the 50th anniversary of John F. Kennedy's assassination in front of millions in Dealey Plaza in Dallas. 50 years, and a lot of books are coming out, and a lot of books are getting a lot of attention, including the author of this book, Dallas 1963. Bill Minutaglio, welcome to Big 550 KTRS here in St. Louis.
I'm really glad to be here.
You are headed over to the Jewish Book Festival, 10:30 today for a book signing and a book reading right there on Schutz and Lindbergh. 10:30, you can buy tickets at the door. We know you just flew in early for us, so we appreciate it. You look at the 1963 November incident from a completely different angle. Talk about it.
We wanted to take a look at what we said, who's the protagonist? Who's the person that we don't know about? We know about Ruby. We know about Oswald. There have been myriad books. But we don't know about this other person, this protagonist, actually, called Dallas. And we think Dallas was extremely influential in creating a circumstance that was very toxic as Kennedy arrived there in November.
It's a pretty controversial idea to put a city on trial, more or less.
My wife wonders if I'm allowed to go back to Dallas anymore, if there's been a moat erected and razor wire and my picture at the borders there. But, Dallas wasn't a city of hate. It was objectified. Really what happened in Dallas was a handful of people hijacked the microphone. A handful of very powerful people. The world's richest man happened to live in Dallas, H.L. Hunt. He was an oil billionaire. And he was really the guy funding the anti-Kennedy resistance. What happened, 7 to 10 folks who lived above the cloud line, had access to the pulpits, to the media, to the bankrolls. They kind of formed a confederacy of anti-Kennedy resistance and made Dallas, I maintain, the most singular city in America at that time because it was the headquarters of the anti-Kennedy movement.
Okay, what was the issue? Why did they not like Kennedy?
Well, beginning with the businessmen, first of all, Dallas is pretty famous for floating on an ocean of oil. And H.L. Hunt being one of the preeminent. He was one of these guys who could stare at the ground and oil would just spring forth. He thought that Kennedy was going to regulate oil in a way that should not be done. And Texas is famous for
was Kennedy going to do that?
I don't think.
Was it a straw man?
I think it was a straw man. I think he was more worried than he should have been, and he took it to another extension. He began accusing Kennedy of being a socialist and a communist. H.L. Hunt was fascinating, and he was spending millions of dollars creating what I would call extremist radio, emanating out of Dallas that reached 10 million listeners a day. Hunt had a theory that if you had a certain amount of money, you should be able to vote 7 times. Ordinary folks would be limited to 1, but above the cloud line monetarily, you should vote 7 times. And his thought was, if he voted 7 times and his colleagues did, they could vote Kennedy out of office. So there was one guy. You had the leader of the Baptist congregation in America, happened to be headquartered in Dallas as well. He suspected Kennedy of practicing a dark art, this exotic religion called Catholicism, and he really meant this. It sounds so strange now 50 years later, but he believed that Kennedy would be on bended knee to the Pope, that the Pope had some plan to infiltrate America, rewrite the Constitution even. And then there were others. There were folks who simply thought that Kennedy was a weakling, that we were going to get annihilated by the Russian bear, and Kennedy wasn't doing enough about it.
All of that. The book is 1963. Bill Minutaglio is our guest. He's going to be at the Jewish Book Festival today, 10:30, Schutz and Lindbergh, and you can get tickets at the door. A lot of people say Kennedy would be a Republican today because he would probably be pro-life, which didn't exist in 1963. He was a tax-cutting man, right? We were in a recession. He cut taxes. So many people would say that he's a Republican today. But all of this, while I'll give you all of this may be true, and these high-powered people were sort of the puppet masters of Dallas. Is there any connection between any of these people and Lee Harvey Oswald?
My contention in the book is that Oswald, existing in this hothouse environment where people are really just turning up the temperature and getting increasingly vitriolic, polarizing, demonizing the president. And by the way, remind me if you've heard of this before. I think we have some of this today in 2013. And by the way, for the Bush administration, for the Obama administration, we have folks who take things beyond politics to a personal animus. But Oswald was there, and he was very, very aware that there was this coterie, this group of people who hated Kennedy. They wanted an action plan. They talked about the mission to get rid of Kennedy, almost a coup d'etat in a way. Again, a distinct minority, very superlative minority, very well funded, somewhat organized. And I think, I can't say that he was inspired, that's the wrong word, but I think he had to be influenced. Most armchair psychologists who've studied Oswald said he was a malleable figure, impressionable, and he was a wannabe. He wanted to make a stamp in history. And he was very disappointed when he defected as a Marine to Russia, and the world didn't come to a stop and write books about him and make movies about him. And I think he saw himself in Dallas as a guy who didn't live above the cloud line, but could behave like the people above the cloud line. He could behave like the Citizen Kings and move to his action plan.
So your contention is that while he might not have had any direct connection, he heard the buzz going around.
Unequivocally. He was out attending rallies and speeches that were vehemently anti-Kennedy, to the point where they were getting, they weren't just rallies, they became riots. And Oswald, history proves that he was at these events, and I think his animosity and anger was just welling.
Yeah, I know the book ends at the beginning. The book ends when Kennedy dies.
Yeah.
Do you have any, and I know in the book you say this isn't about the conspiracy or anything like that, but do you think Oswald acted alone?
I do think he acted alone. The book, thank you for noting that it's not a conspiracy book. We try to remove all tinfoil hats that come with the book, and nor is it another one of those books, the We Were There, my personal account kind of books. And I'm not besmirching those. Conspiracy theories need to be explored, and the personal reminiscences need to be explored as well. But we wanted to take a look at what was shaping Oswald and really what was waiting for Kennedy when he got there.
Who told him? I mean, hindsight's 20/20.
Yep.
Somebody probably told him, "Don't go to Kennebunkport 2 weeks before because there's a storm coming." But who told him? But since he died, the story is people told him, "Don't go to Dallas.
Yeah.
It's dangerous."
It's a great question and fascinating, because it almost turns it into a whodunit. Had he been getting warnings, and he had been. One of the most famous people to warn him was Stanley Marcus, who owned our finest store in Texas, maybe in that part of the country, Neiman Marcus, a high-end emporium, and he was close to the Kennedy inner circle. He had to do it kind of quietly. It didn't really behoove him to be known as a pro-Kennedy supporter in Dallas. He might lose a lot of his customers, but he was sending messages to Kennedy and to LBJ, whom he knew personally. Stay away. You want to think about it. You might not want to come here. There were other folks. The United States ambassador to the United Nations, Adlai Stevenson, in a very famous moment, came to Dallas in October of '63, and he was attacked. He was attacked by a mob. People were trying to hit him with sticks. They were spitting at him. They were lunging at him. Police made arrests. Stevenson escaped with his life. He was dragged into a limousine. He raced away, and he turned to somebody, this is in downtown Dallas, and said, "Are these humans or are they animals?" And he promptly began calling Kennedy and saying, "You really need to think about whether or not you should come to Dallas."
But this state elected LBJ senator and then elected him vice president, right?
Yeah.
Kennedy won Texas the first time around.
Yeah, absolutely. But indicative of this sort of welling violence in November of 1960, it was then the most tightly contested presidential race in American history. 4 days before the election, Bobby Kennedy told his brother, "We need to send that," he said, SOB, "let's send that SOB down to Dallas. We need to save Texas." Is our guy. He's the vice presidential candidate, but even Texas is in play. What happened, I think this has really been exiled to the dustbin of history. In November of 1960, LBJ and the very dignified and demure Lady Bird Johnson were attacked by a mob in downtown Dallas of anti-Kennedy, anti-LBJ people. They ran up to him, same thing. They began spitting at them, hitting them with signs, calling them a Judas, calling them a socialist. The sense was that LBJ had sold out to the northeastern establishment, the northeastern liberal socialists.
Let's talk about the future or the past of Texas, because Texas was Democratic, became more Democratic up until relatively very recently. Yeah. Right? I mean, Ann Richards was a Democratic governor of Texas, and only George Bush and this new, last 10 years has turned it into a very red state.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's the trouble. I think the media, and I'm part of it, we're guilty of objectifying
Well,
Texas.
you're always guilty of it.
We're guilty of many things. And being from Texas, as I travel around the country, apparently I'm really guilty of a lot of things. People say to me, it's all your fault. You're from Texas. And it seems all encompassing.
Right.
But yeah, Texas is a very complex state, and it had a lot of populist and progressive leanings that I think people have forgotten about. And again, I really want to underscore this. Dallas really wasn't a city of hate, but there were folks in Dallas who truly hated Kennedy. It was a distinct and scary minority.
Bill Minutaglio is our guest. He's going to be at the Jewish Book Festival today at 10:30. The book is called Dallas 1963. 10:30, tickets at the door. And the book festival will run through November 17th. STLJewishBookFestival.org for more information. You made reference to it, and I have to at least talk about it, and that is this culture of hate, very similar to what is today, 2013. But I'll go back to the Bush administration. Right. There was a level of hate from the Democrats. Yep. Maybe doesn't get as much attention. Maybe it wasn't. Yep. Maybe it was under the surface a little bit more. But when your party's out of office, that guy's a communist. Yep. He's a Nazi. Right. He's the devil. Right. That's not the way to go forward.
No, that's a wonderful observation. This demonizing, this polarization, it does nobody good. I'm now giving you a political speech. I'm not running for office. Nobody would ever vote for me if they looked at me. But you're hitting on the head. What happened in Dallas back in 1963? I think it was really the dawn of this sort of smash-mouth demonization in America. And you're absolutely right. It's sort of an equal opportunity demonization. Bush experienced it. I wrote a biography of George W. Bush, so I traveled with him a lot and saw the same thing, the same level of vitriol, the yelling and the screaming. I was telling some folks the other day that I have, it's not a fancy TV, but I've got picture-in-picture on my TV. I can watch two channels at once, and sometimes for grins, because I'm easily bored, I'll watch one channel screaming at the other channel. Mm-hmm. And I have the cable host over here and the cable host on the other channel. And it's a metaphor in a sense. I mean, there's too much yelling and screaming. That does sound like I'm politicking. But the extremes are too extreme. And I think as I travel around talking about my book around the country, I hear a lot of folks saying that. And I had somebody in Detroit not long ago say, hey, you should change the title of your book to America 2013. It's the same level of yelling and screaming and shouting.
If you were to ask one, I want to ask this, but I don't know who to ask it of. If you were to ask one historical figure in the book a question, what would that question be? What did you not get?
Yeah, sure. I'd ask Stanley Marcus how he was able to pull it off. Stanley Marcus, again, probably the most famous figure at the time in Dallas, was an internationalist. He really wanted to drag kind of Dallas into the international community, get it out of the xenophobia. He also wanted to sell a lot of clothing. He was a very pragmatic man, and yet he was a spy. He was really a spy in a way. He had to live a secret life. Many of the people who were his customers were these folks who were just hated Kennedy. They thought he was, again, this Roman Catholic phobia, socialist. He was going to deregulate things. But he had to be nice to them. But very quietly in the background, he was espousing civil rights and a lot of the Kennedy LBJ sort of new policies that would only come to realization after Kennedy's death. So he was a man almost like a spy again, who was a fascinating figure in American history.
Bill Minutaglio has written the book Dallas 1963. He's off to the Jewish Book Festival, 10:30, right there on Schutz and Lindbergh. Tickets at the door. Bill, good luck with the book. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
You got it. 9:24. The board meeting's in